WealthTech Solutions panel, and then we have our last keynote, which is on branding for halal business and the art of storytelling. So for the WealthTech panel, our panelists will be Joann Enriquez, the CEO of IAP, Investment Account Platform Malaysia, as well as Mr. Shah Mohamed, Director, Product and Innovation of Privasia Technologies Berhad, and also Dr. Choo, Koon, the Global Asset Director of Global Asset. Sorry. So the moderator for today will be Mr. Jonathan, and Jonathan Lim from partner, who is a partner at Zaid Ibrahim & Co. So Jonathan is a corporate partner at Zaid Ibrahim & Co. with considerable experience in areas such as fintech, venture capital, blockchain technology, payment systems, digital remittance, and initial coin offerings. As an active supporter of the financial technology fraternity, Jonathan also currently serves as secretary of the Fintech Association of Malaysia, wherein he assists in developing the burgeoning sector's growth here in Malaysia and the region. In addition, Jonathan also acts as legal counsel and mentor of Founders Institute, a pre-seed startup accelerator with a presence in over 180 cities worldwide, a company that aims to promote effective and long-term digital transformation in the legal industry in Malaysia. So I'd like to invite Mr. Jonathan first to the stage as our moderator for today. Dr. Choo is the director of Global Asset, a multinational group of companies that provide a wide array of financial solutions to international corporations and personal investments. Global Asset has partners in branch offices in Hong Kong, Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, and China. He is also currently on the board of directors for a couple of licensed financial companies in Hong Kong, Lebanon, and China, and on the board of listed companies, including one of the top performing ASX listed companies in 2017, which he founded. He published a book entitled The Lemming Trader, which is loosely based on his first doctorate thesis, focusing on investment and trading psychology. He is currently completing his second thesis on IPO behavior psychology. Next, Joann Enriquez is CEO of IAP, or Investment Account Platform, which is the first multi-bank platform combining the expertise of Islamic banking and efficiency of technology to channel funds from investors to viable ventures, fintech. IAP targets a wider range of underlying ventures such as SMEs, listed firms, and multinational companies to raise funds on the platform. This is in contrast with some other fundraising platforms. Joann has recently been listed among the top 20 most influential women in Islamic business and finance for the year of 2019, and last week during maybe not last week, but recently during Women I Award Ceremony Gala Dinner 2019 in Dubai. And Shah Mohamed, Director of Product and Innovation, Privasia Technologies Berhad, is, or previously was heading Islamic Digital Economy and FinTech programs at Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, or MDEC, putting him at the intersection of science, tech, business, and positive impact. So would I please have all of our panelists to join our moderator there, and everyone please give them a warm welcome, a round of applause. So I tried to make it a little bit easy for a moderator by doing the introductions already, so you don't have to ask them their name and where they're from, but you can go directly into the discussion. And yeah, we have about 30 minutes for this one, and if we have some time in the end, we'll open up for Q&A. Okay, so I'll pass the floor to you, sir.
Thank you. So before we start, I guess let me just put some depth into the Islamic finance industry. A report that was recently issued by the Dubai Islamic Economic Development Center. So it's a 2018 report that was estimating that the Islamic finance industry as a whole in 2017 is about 2.4 trillion. And we're expecting that growth to actually hit up to about 3.8 trillion by 2023. Right? And in this industry itself, there has been more than 90 fintech players, there's been 65 Islamic P2P players that's already sprouted in the market. And that led to what we're discussing today, which is WealthTech, right? Wealth management technology. And wealth management technology came in many forms, from AI to advisory to micro investments to portfolio investments. So my first question to the panel this afternoon is that how are WealthTech solutions affecting the Islamic investment industry? Maybe Joann, you want to start?
First of all, Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace and prosperity to all. We were given some guide questions to answer. Sorry, I wasn't heard. sorry. Okay, Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace and prosperity to all. We were given some guide questions to answers in this panel for discussion, and I sort of typed it 2 hours before I came here to make sure I don't forget anything. And I covered the topics at hand quite comprehensively, so allow me to read. So going back to the basics, I remind myself that in Islam it is understood that the real owner of wealth is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are mere proxy and act as a guardian, and that eventually we will be accountable for all that has been given to us. This means answerable and accountable for the wealth, the utility of the wealth, where it was used, how it prospered, what was consumed, and what eventually remains. So the various development in wealth management, or specifically in wealth tech solutions in the investment space, or in all spaces of Islamic wealth management for that matter, exists so that we can effectively fulfill our roles as guardians of the wealth that we are in custody of. The rise of technology such as the investment account platform, iaplatform.com, where ventures in need of financing applies online, where banks together with retail investors like you and I, corporate and institutional investors create an ecosystem or a community where each contributes to that efficient mobilization of funds or wealth. This allows for more access to all and in essence democratize the Islamic investment space.
So basically what we are discussing today, I could perhaps say that platforms and solutions today are using a lot of technology such as big data, artificial intelligence to provide real, often more cost-effective alternative to the service of wealth management. Right? And with the introduction of technology, Shah, maybe you have something to share about how it affects the industry as a whole.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulullah wa man walah. Bishrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. I'll take it as a two-part question. The easier technology and wealth. I'll tackle the easier bit, which is technology. If we look at it from a demographic perspective, Muslim nations versus non-Muslim nations, the key differentiation factor here is the youth, the population of the youth in the Islamic world is far higher than the non-Muslim world. And what do we see? Among the youth, their tech savviness is far greater than what it was during my parents' or my grandparents' time, right? And I see that tech would be the way to go. Of course, the conventional methods that we have to a certain amount, might change in the sense that there will be a lot more tech involved for global advisory and whatnot. But for some time, there will be those conventional models in because, as you mentioned, the size of the fund is huge and it's catered to a certain segment, right? Now, coming to the wealth, what are some of the barriers when we're talking about wealth management in the Muslim world and the non-Muslim world? Let's take Malaysia as an example. From 1970 to now, if you look at the Gini index, our wealth disparity has gone down to 0.4%, which is great. But if you see, if you say savings as a proxy to wealth, and we look at discretionary saving, which is SB, right? The Gini index actually shows us 0.8%, 0.8, which is far higher. This shows that we do not have a predominant investing and saving culture. So, and also, if we say that the structure that we have at this moment, wealth management is predominantly for the high net worth individuals. At one hand, you're tackling with the culture itself, and at the second stage, you don't have platform for it, right? So this is where tech comes in. So what would be the barrier? The ticket size for entry is higher. So large barrier. You need to have about 200K for an investment banker to even talk to you, right? Wealth manager will not even talk to you if you don't have 50,000 ringgit to invest. What does a common person do? So what technology has actually done is actually reduce the bite size. So now one can actually invest and get fraction of the fraction of the fraction of the fraction of an asset, for example, right? So this shows that technology does address some of the entry barriers, right? But the large, bigger question that will take us some time to address, and it's to do with the whole ecosystem around the area, because the concentration is again to the high net worth. Why? Because we have this culture of spending rather than saving and investing, right? This is where agencies like Magic, MDEC, NAFCAP, and all those government agencies and also associations need to come in and create the right conducive ecosystems to promote or have a much more sustainable ecosystem for savings and investment.
Okay, so maybe I could sum it up this way by saying that by having WealthTech, it somewhat created new challenges, but it also opened up to a wider scale of opportunities as well. It may also promote the fact that there could be the replacement of financial advisors at one hand, but we can also look at it in the sense whereby now financial advisors should be providing added value above and beyond what algorithms are being able to provide, right? So in deliberating on this, leading to my next question, of course we have one of the world's best Sharia compliant global advisory platform, which is Wahid Invest in Saudi, that was operating in 2015. Putting that as our focus point at this point in time, do you think that for Islamic investment, the next phase to the industry is for emerging Islamic investment startups being the new alternative way forward? Like how the fintech industry somewhat disrupted the financial market, would Islamic investment startups be the new alternative for investment?
It's just inevitable, right? It has to happen. Because looking at, again, the whole demographic scenario that we've got, our youth population is growing. And as much as we feel that we are primitive, if we look at, recent events that have actually changed the whole global dynamics. I'm talking about the Egyptian revolution, I'm talking about the revolution in Turkey, were all triggered by technology. And who were the users of these technology? Muslim youth. So as much as we feel that we are primitive, we are not. We are one of the highest, from a technology adoption perspective, our technology adoption is highest globally. Malaysians are actually one of the highest users of Facebook in Southeast Asia. Although Indonesia has a higher population, but even then we are one of the highest, right? So from an adoption perspective, it's going to be rampant. Now, youth is also becoming more knowledgeable, and they know what they want, right? Couple that with technology, being technology savvy. Fintech startups, have a lot on their plate. They have to serve the growing market. For example, approximately 98% of the Malaysian businesses are SMEs, and a lot of them do not have access to funding from a conventional means. Conventional means here would be financial institutions, banks. Why? Because they have their, risk appetite and whatnot. So a lot of them do not qualify, predominantly because banks a lot of times do not understand certain technology, do not have the leg space to actually go and understand this, right? This is where fintech platforms come into play, because they have the expertise to actually understand the technology and attract people who understand the process as well, right? So I think this will just grow more, especially in the Islamic finance, Islamic wealth management segment.
Joann?
Okay, thank you, Shah, for the segue. IAP is considered as a startup. Although we stand on the strong legs of the bank, we remain to be a startup by age, by definition, and the very narrative that we propose. We offer new alternatives and encourage the spirit of collaboration, not only with the private sector, but as well as the public sectors. We actually see that happening in our platform right now, where GLCs and state institutions participate in the fundraising in the platform, and that in turn allows us and opens doors to create more innovative models that encourage public and private partnership. Basically, the new players challenge the current space to be more creative and competitive, and in the end allows for more options that encourages vibrancy and competition. And as you know, in competition, at the end of the day, it's really the end users that benefit. The Islamic finance industry has begun experiencing unprecedented innovation, but the Islamic fintech has still a long journey ahead. In 2018, a report came out and identified 90 Islamic financial tech startups versus about 12,000 startups emerging globally to challenge the very aspect of the way we do finance. With the Islamic population growing, as Shah mentioned, leaps and bounds, we see a big window of opportunity in the Islamic digital space for this reason.
Maybe my next question, follow-up question, is more for Dr. Choo. I think Shah and Joann did explain the fact that there is a global growth in terms of Muslim population. And Pew Research Center actually came up with statistics saying that 2014, there was about 1.7 billion Muslims. It will grow up to about 2.2 billion in 2030. Now, as we look at population growth per se, population growth does not necessarily translate to market growth, right? Population growth sometimes will translate to market impairment as well, as Shah clearly also identified, saying that ticket sizes are very big for conventional players at this point in time to participate in wealth management. So, on a sociological aspect, what would your view be with the introduction of robo-advisory, with the introduction of Islamic products in the market? Would this population growth that parties are looking at be the spectrum whereby investors should pinnacle their investments on? Because from 1.7 billion to 2.2 billion, that's a huge market to go into.
First of all, I want to say that I don't think we have this question on the paper, so this is very impromptu. Okay. Anyway, I know that from statistics, we are looking at Islamic Muslim populations getting a quarter of the world population very, very soon. So every 4 person that you see on the street, one will definitely be a Muslim. So that's the reason why my firm, we also apply for Sharia compliance, and my core activities, we do bring companies to IPO. And right now we are looking at a lot of companies in Malaysia and in the region. we are talking about all these Islamic values, core values. They are, if you put into an international perspective, they're actually very, very close to what the UN is trying to do. The UN is trying to introduce these 17 sustainable goals. They are very, very, very similar. I mean, there's a bit of Islamic values on Sharia portion. It's very similar. It's like almost like 90% similar. So when we are looking at projects, there's always misperceptions of people looking at Sharia, is it less profitable? Because of the way they look at revenues, look at profit, look at the interest portion of it. So Jonathan said a great thing. He said that population growth may not equate to economic growth. This is something that is very, very non-mathematical to a certain extent. Yeah, so I agree with him totally. And we are looking at a lot of problems from overpopulations, from congestions, from pollutions, things like that. And this creates another industry, another economy of their own. And somehow they are nothing to do with whether they are Islamic or Sharia sometimes. So to a certain extent, it's always good to look at the core values of Sharia. Then we compare it with the UN sustainability goals, and that is where we piece everything together. And from an investment perspective, I think it's good to have everything on the table. We will see which one have a better selling angle, better story. Because at the end of the day, whether we are doing a business, doing an NGO, we want to spread the message across, whether is it locally, regionally, or globally. So something must be on the table, something must be good. For a lack of better word, something has to be sexy on the table. So I think a lot of selling angles, a lot of pitching. If we can add Sharia in, we will take care of 1/4 of the populations. So this is something that is very, very good. I mean, even though I'm Chinese, I know in the future maybe 1/3 of the world is Chinese. So if we can take care of the Chinese, we can take care of the Muslim community, we conquer more than half of the world. So this is my paradigm here.
Yeah. So before Shah adds, and this is the part where I want Shah's perspective on it as well. I'll throw a little stone to my question. Yeah. Fintech sprouted in the 2000s simply because innovators found a problem statement to resolve. Right? With the population growth of 1.7 billion to 2.2 billion in 2030, yes, as much as I know Dr. Choo and I, it was a bit of a layered question again today, to talk about population growth may not be the demographic or may not be the element we look into when it comes to investment. But is there sufficient problem statement in the Islamic industry for fintech to advance?
So, if you look at it from an investor's perspective, right, what are some of the expectations there? Now, the one major one will be reduction of friction. Right? Can technology reduce the friction that is prevalent in so-called non-digital realm? Right? Simply just to pick up a phone and call your broker, and then saying that will he pick up or will he not, because he's taking a lot of calls, is a friction on its own. Right? Then to have doubts over different opinions as to which sector is doing well and which is not. Can technology bridge that gap or reduce that friction? Conventional or Islamic, right? But that's a fundamental sort of, from an investor's perspective, that would be. Now, through platforms and through technology, information comes to the investor itself, rather than looking for information that is tedious and all that. So it's not a matter of basically waiting for information to come. It's instantly there. With technology, that is possible. With AI and blockchain and all that, transparency and all that is in place. But when you have robo-advisory and all that, things have become a lot easier in the sense that if you want to place a bet or if you want to take a stand, instantly it's possible. forecasts can be made. So now, if we apply this to Islamic wealth management, what is the next sort of expectation? That will be Sharia assurance. So right now, the impediment that technology players are having is playing tussle with how to get something to be labeled as Sharia compliant, right? Technology itself is agnostic, right? It doesn't have any religion or creed or whatnot. Application of technology differentiates that it is Sharia compliant or not, right? That is more of a process question as opposed to a technology question, right? And can technology then make it more Sharia insurance, more transparent and whatnot? Yes, it can. Can you have an AI backed where you have all the contracts as big data into a system which can then tell you if it's Sharia compliant or not? Yes, you can. Are there systems, such systems in existence? Yes, there are. Right? If you want to know if something is Sharia compliant or if it is not, why not? What needs to be tweaked for it to be Sharia compliant? Are there such solutions in the market? Yes, there are. So, conventional and Islamic, the differentiating factor would be the Sharia assurance bit. And can technology help that? Yes, it can. Now, is it scalable? And you're talking about, population doesn't necessarily need to be the prime differentiating factor. But if you look at the size of fund on high net worth individuals globally, it's about more than 1.7 trillion, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And if we are to then say how much of it is Sharia compliant or Sharia asset based, right? It's about, I think, 200 billion, if I'm not mistaken, at this moment of time, coming from Middle East alone. Right? Exactly. So that is significantly high. So for us to then say, can we then translate this conventional wealth into Islamic? Yes, because the market is there. Funds are there. Now, if we just look at it from a social fund process, Islamic social fund constitute to about 200 billion at this moment of time. This is just from Waqaf and Infaq, not including Zakat here. These two funds alone can then be plugged into the wealth management aspect and be mobilized. It's just a matter of us going to say, how do we now create processes that are easier for technology providers to facilitate transactions? I think that is a tussle between technology providers and the realm, the Sharia compliant realm, based on a Sharia advisory side we're facing at this moment. If that can be synchronized or impediments can be reduced, then I think there is huge market for that.
So if I do hear you correctly, what we're establishing here is that in the Islamic industry, funds are readily available, but access to funds seems to be a little bit restrained simply because there are certain barriers that allows these investments to flow down to players at the end of the day. On that account, right, with the introduction of blockchain, with the introduction of things like AI, right, and I think Joann will have some thoughts into it. Would that not then promote Sharia principles when it comes to transparency, when it comes to market integrity, when it comes to a more friendly participation, rather than, would that be the solution? Would technology at the end of the day be the solution to curb this problem statement at the end of the day? So, sure.
Coming from investment point of view, let's say I'm the project owner, then if you give me a choice, I will go for the conventional fundings rather than going for Islamic fundings. Reason being very simple because there is a bigger sea out there, bigger ocean out there, and compared to the Islamic funds. And some of the Islamic fund owners, they are more restrictive. So, say for example, let's say I got a Series A from Islamic fund, then they may restrict us from going into conventional fundings for my Series B, Series C, or IPO. So, this is something that is getting a lot of Islamic style. They are caught in the middle. They want to follow the principles, but not forgetting they need cash, they need capitals to go ahead to progress. So that's my part of it.
Just an addition to that. Now, when we are talking about enhancement of transparency, reduction of costs, making processes more simpler, having a strong social connotation to projects, for example, in the conventional realm, right? Now, if that is then coupled with Sharia compliance, they're saying that one would go for a conventional fund as opposed to Islamic fund because there is a layer that is impeding, and there are not many funds out there to begin with, right? From a VC perspective, apart from what the funds are used for, the process itself isn't very far from being Sharia compliant. Because if you think about it, it's mudaraba or musharaka there anyway, right? It's just not labeled as one. But if there is a sort of, the bridges are narrowed to see that, okay, the ethical dimensions are there, transparency is there. Now, how close is it to the Islamic? Now we just look at certain fundamentals of things that constitutes non-Sharia compliant. You may have to have alcohol or gambling and all that. If that is missing, for a firm to then go and raise Series C shouldn't be a problem. But that needs to be put into paper. That is something that is not there at this moment of time, and we hope, inshallah, that happens.
So I think it's just, again, going back to the basics. I think we've overcomplicated too many processes in terms of saying, is this Islamic or not? In actuality, it's very basic. I mean, is what you're doing just? Is what you're doing fair? The contracts in the various Arabic names, which I'm not going to try to mention because the wrong intonation might mean differently, is just a guideline. I mean, let us not be overshadowed by the processes and go back to the basics of things, that these guidelines are there to ensure that the parties that are participating, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, are all getting the fair share of the transaction. It's very simple. You don't need 200 years of education to be able to distinguish what is right and what is wrong. Sometimes we miss out on the basic, most fundamental of things that if I ask my 13-year-old or my 9-year-old or even my youngest is 9, so even if my 9-year-old is asked, should this be done? He can answer you without having to have anything on Islamic finance if it's going to be done or not, primarily because it's very clear, black and white, it's good and it's bad. So in trying to complicate things, whether it's certification, whether it's processes that are in place, is this VC Islamic, is that VC not Islamic, is that, we are forgetting why the guidelines are there. Islam is a practical religion, and it is a guide to make things easy, not difficult. If what you are doing are making things more difficult, then one must ask, are you really Islamic?
Technology certainly is going to change the whole dynamics of things.
I think at the end of the day, I think if we are going to talk about Islamic, whether it's fund management, investing, it should be more accommodating. I think for most VCs, PEs, or investors, or family office, they are not going to do anything that is against universal core values. They are not going to invest in the prostitution, I'm for sure. So there are a lot of things that are not allowed in Islam. It's not allowed by any other spectrum. So I think at the end of the day, this is something for the Islamic fund managers to look into this. I'm sure there is a Sharia bond windows, I think perhaps of 15% or something. They just need to ensure that core values are well taken care of, fair treatments, then the rest should be easy. Easier to measure. Yeah.
So, because of lack of time, maybe I'll just conclude with this. As much as we've discussed on the impediments of how this Sharia compliance is maybe, or the impediments of how Islamic fintech may face, I think what we can comfortably conclude at the end of the day is that as a consumer, investment needs to have two elements. One, trust. The other one is comfort level. And clearly, I guess, based on whatever we discussed, we understand how agnostic technology is, and technology can actually fit into allow comfort and trust to be in place, while each and every one of the Muslim parties or Muslim investors could be comfortable enough to then invest into global advisory or AI or blockchain to grow the WealthTech industry. I think all of us will concur that there is indeed a very significant problem statement to resolve in the Islamic financial circle, and Islamic fintech is definitely the way to go forward. Yeah. With that, maybe I will open up to one or two questions from the floor. Okay, I guess we've addressed everything. Yeah.
Summarize in a nutshell what we discussed today. So I just wanted to summarize what we discussed today. Basically, in the recent obliteration of how we do business, the meaning of this in the past century, the recent obliteration of how we do business, meaning in the past century, relative to 4,000 years ago, has made riba, or unjustified profit or gain, very mainstream, almost very acceptable. Practicing Islamic finance and promoting Islamic finance has become very bleak. We continue to struggle with it as a community. The interdependence and dealings of the global economy has allowed us to spread riba and injustice like a plague. Now, at the dawn of these new mechanisms, specifically in the Islamic technology space focusing on finance, we are allowed to come up with solutions to counter this plague, a disease that continues to sip in our lives even as we speak right now. Perhaps all of us here present are not immune to this. So technological advances bring us hope that perhaps with transparency, accountability, and the proper vesting in risk, we perhaps may have a fighting chance from the further spread of this plague. The technologies that we've developed that allows for access, efficiency, transparency, and accountability gives us a fighting chance to promote what Islam teaches in the guidelines of Sharia. The fundamentals and principles are not new, brothers and sisters, nor is it exclusive to Islam alone. The tenets of fair dealings and equity is quite universal. We are simply reliving and being true to what has been taught to us 1,400 years ago. The systematic, practical teaching of Islam is not new. It's just now perhaps we have the tools necessary to fight this disease of riba and injustice. And the secret in this antidote perhaps lies in the technology that we all continue to develop, Islamic and non-Islamic.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists, and thank you for the summary, Sister Joann. And let's give all of them a round of applause and invite them to the front for the photo session. Thank you all very much. Some of our panelists in front. Just right there, just right there. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Okay, that concludes the last panel for today. We have now our last keynote with the topic Branding for Halal Businesses, the Art of Storytelling. This will be presented by Dr. A.J. Manai, who is a TEDx speaker and also the co-founder of Choo. So Choo is